At about 9:30 a.m. on June 6, 2009, Gil Perez was seen by a neighbor walking down the street near his home in Palm Beach County, Florida. The two even waved to each other like it was just another Saturday morning in the neighborhood. It was not. That would be the last time Gil would be seen alive. From the Florida Sheriff's Association, this is Cold Case Florida. According to family members, it was typical to not hear from Gil until later in the day on Saturdays, because he often stayed out late at local bars or entertained guests into the early morning hours. But this was not an ordinary Saturday. There was a family birthday party later that evening, and his brother went over around 5:30 to make sure he was coming. The door was unlocked, which was normal for Gil, but what his brother found was anything but. He discovered Gil on the bedroom floor, naked and covered in blood. He went over to Gil and shook his knee to see if he was alive. He then ran out of the apartment yelling that his brother was dead. According to Mary Bain, crime scene manager at the Palm Beach Sheriff's Office, it was one of the bloodiest scenes she had ever encountered in her over 20 years on the job.
So there was blood on the walls, there was blood on the floor, there was blood on the furniture, there was blood on the blinds in the kitchen, there was blood in the shower, there was blood on the shower walls, literally blood on almost every surface. I believe there was blood even on the ceiling. It was just a very bloody scene. Typically I'll go into a crime scene and if there's blood, there's like a pool of blood around where the victim is laying. This wasn't like that. There was blood spattered everywhere.
She describes the apartment and shares her thoughts about the stark contrast between its current condition and the way it usually was kept, and what that meant.
The scene itself was just a 4-room apartment, villa type home. There was a kitchen to the right, a living room to the left, a bathroom a little bit further from the kitchen, and then the bedroom was on the back left. You could tell that the person who lived there was a tidy person, like everything had its own place. So the things that were not in place, it was very obvious that those things had been moved. There was debris, broken things all over the place, just copious amounts of blood. It told me that this was a very violent crime.
Detective Tina Frank is the lead investigator on the case. She works in violent crimes in the cold case unit at the Palm Beach Sheriff's Office. She says this was not a random attack.
From my experience in violent crimes, this was definitely personal. It was a lot of rage based on everything that we saw in the crime scene and the photos. Obviously, I wasn't at the actual scene, but we have photos and videos and such, and it was very personal.
While Detective Frank could not discuss a possible murder weapon due to the ongoing nature of the investigation, she could share one unusual detail.
He was attacked with different items, and it looked like he fought back.
The murder occurred inside the victim's home in Lake Worth, which Detective Frank describes.
This crime occurred at Mr. Perez's home, which was at 1229 South M Street in the city of Lake Worth. At the time, in 2009, so the city of Lake Worth had its own police department up until August of 2008. So they had it was a municipality, they had Lake Worth Police Department until fall of 2008 when they merged with the Palm Beach County Sheriff's Office. So when this homicide occurred, the area was patrolled by the Palm Beach County Sheriff's Office deputies. The area where it occurred, the home was a duplex, a 2-apartment duplex owned by the victim. His mother and brother lived in the front duplex and he lived in the back by himself. The area was primarily residential. It's a short walk to Dixie Highway, which is where many businesses are, shops, little grocery stores, bars. So even though it was a residential area, it's not that far from businesses.
It is also important to understand who Gil Perez was. By all accounts, a friendly, helpful person who was well-liked by coworkers and neighbors.
I believe to his coworkers and friends, he was known as Gil. To his family, he was known as Papo. He was 47 when he was murdered. He worked as administrative assistant for the Department of Children and Families at their office in the city of West Palm. I believe he worked there for about 11 years. He was described by a lot of people as a loner, including his family. He worked during the week, and when he got paid, he had no tech. He didn't believe in tech stuff. He had no phone. He had no computer. He had no laptop. He didn't use cell phones. He didn't use credit cards. So everything he did was face to face. So when he got paid, he would go to the bank, take out money, give money to his mom so she can pay the bills. And that was it. He was not a techie person at the time. There's not one person that said anything negative about him. He had no enemies. They said he would never hurt anybody. He was very friendly. He would go out on the weekends. That was his time to party, so to speak. He would hang out with coworkers, hang out with friends, go out and meet people at bars in West Palm and in the city of Lake Worth. Normally, he would sleep during the day on the weekends, where much of his family would try to leave him alone for that reason, because they knew he was out late. And that's the same thing that happened the night before he was murdered.
Palm Beach County is located on Florida's Atlantic coast, just north of Fort Lauderdale. The county includes Donald Trump's Florida home, Mar-a-Lago, as well as the northern edge of Everglades National Park. It is very rich in diversity and history. The city of Lake Worth has had its challenges with crime, according to Detective Frank.
The crime rate was high in terms of property crimes and violent crime. Back then, there was a high percentage of robberies against Hispanics in that area. So that area is mostly, even back then, now it is, but back then there was a large percentage of a Hispanic and a Haitian population. So a lot of non-residents that were there, and they were being targeted, mostly with random robberies. Like, people would know they were cashing their checks. They didn't trust the banks, so they would keep the cash, and bad guys knew that, so they would target them.
As often happens in areas with transient populations, there is a general mistrust of law enforcement and financial institutions, which can actually make residents more vulnerable to crime.
Sometimes people are hesitant to call police. They're not trusting of police just because of where they came from. It could be that they don't call because they're worried about their immigration status, which is not a concern to us at all, even back then. And if somebody like that is not cautious with showing their money when they're out, it could be an issue where somebody might see that and take advantage in terms of victimizing the person to steal the cash.
Investigators also learned that Gil did not drive and relied on public transportation.
He used public transportation, and he got friends and coworkers to pick him up and drop him off, and he also used taxis. In his past, when he lived up in New York, he witnessed a very traumatic accident, and after that, he never drove.
Gil and his family were very close, both in relationship and their living arrangements.
He had 3 sisters. 2 of them were local, and he had 2 brothers. One of his brothers lived in the first duplex with the mom. That brother was the 911 caller. He was the one that found Gil. The other 2 sisters were also local. Since this has happened, 2 of the siblings have passed away from cancer. And mom is still alive. She's living with one of the sisters, and she has the start of early onset Alzheimer's.
The initial investigation and news reports in 2009 discussed that Gil was gay, in the context that his lifestyle and apparent promiscuity made the job of finding his killer even more difficult, according to Detective Frank.
He didn't hide that he was homosexual or gay, whatever term you want to use. His family knew, his coworkers knew. The detectives got different information from different people they spoke to in terms of long-term relationships. So some people had said he was in 2 long-term relationships, but they weren't recent. Some coworkers said that, he would randomly bring, men home after meeting them in bars or meeting them, he would take Palm Tran to work. He would meet somebody on a Palm Tran, bring them home. So that makes it a little bit more difficult for us because nobody knows who these people are and they don't come forward. So yeah, it makes it a little bit harder to figure out versus, let's say it's a homicide where it's a domestic homicide where it's the person's partner or husband or wife. We know who that is. This is not the case here.
The investigation was thorough, but detectives believe they did not get the whole story in terms of all the people Gil had relationships with.
So the initial detectives did a lot of interviews within the first month, getting information from different people, identifying people that knew him, people that weren't in a relationship with him. So when that happens, whoever they talk to, they try to get a DNA standard from them just to rule them out. So they were able to do that. Unfortunately, it doesn't look like not everybody that he was in a relationship was identified. So somebody somewhere knows something or saw something. It could be the person lived on the block. The family doesn't know. The friends don't know. He was discreet, but he wasn't discreet. I don't know if that makes any sense. So people knew his lifestyle, but, he also didn't provide that much information, like names, where these people live, what they did for a living, things like that.
Detective Frank recaps what we know about the last 24 hours or so of Gil's life.
He went out Friday night with his coworkers to different bars in the city of West Palm Beach. He was dropped off by one of the coworkers around the 900 block of South Dixie, which is not far from where his house is, but it's also on Dixie Highway, which is close to where some of the bars are, because he actually told his coworker he wasn't finished going out. So she had dropped him off a little bit before midnight, Friday into Saturday. The last person to see him was his neighbor, and that was Saturday morning at 9:30 in the morning. And the original investigating detective actually went back to confirm with her that it was him that she saw, not somebody else, and she confirmed that it was Gil because they waved to each other as he was walking south on his street. So she would have been the last person to see him.
The family was not concerned about not hearing from Gil that day until it got closer to the time of the birthday party.
Gil was supposed to go to a birthday party with his sister. She knew that he normally went out Friday nights. She actually came by to try to make sure he was awake. She came by around 5 p.m., knocked on his door, no answer, did not go in for the reason I explained earlier, and she left. The brother was back and forth the whole day. Mom was not home. Nobody saw him that day, but his sister said she had a bad feeling, so she called the brother that lived there and said, hey, go check on him because something's off. Like, we're supposed to go to this party tonight. It was a birthday party, and, he's not answering. He hasn't called me. So he went and knocked on the door. There was no answer. He opened the door and went in, and that's when he found his brother dead in the bedroom. He started screaming. When he started screaming, one of the neighbors, the wife, heard him screaming. So she came over, alerted her husband. So the two neighbors walked over, and one of the neighbors partially walked in and saw it as well. And his brother called 911 then right away.
Detective Frank shares what happens after the sheriff's office arrived on the scene.
2 road patrol deputies arrived. They went into the apartment, to the home, cleared the home, which is what we call make sure that there's no suspects there, make sure that it's safe. They also saw the victim there. After they made sure nobody else was in there, I believe they called fire rescue just to confirm that he was deceased. And once that happened, everybody moved out, and they locked the apartment down to make sure that nobody else disturbed the crime scene.
Mary Bain was one of the first to arrive after the scene had been secured.
I actually got called in on my day off to assist with this case. My assignment was to assist with running the Leica 360 scanner. So I arrived on scene at about just before 8:30 on that Saturday evening. When I got there, the other crime scene investigators were full on documentation status. So I was jumping in to scan the scene with a scanner, which was a task back then.
She explains the purpose of the scanner and how it documents the crime scene.
So if you imagine going on Zillow to look for a home, and you can zoom through a home and you can see a 360-degree photo of that home, and you can maneuver through the house and go through room by room. That's what this scanner does. We set it up starting outside the scene, and we kind of work our way in, and we scan all the rooms, and it provides a 360-degree photo and kind of like an interactive video that you can look through the scene with.
Mary says the quantity of blood made even that process more difficult.
Being that there was so much blood all over the house, especially on the floors, anybody who walks in and doesn't have their footwear protected would leave possible bloody footprints. And that makes it challenging to delineate whose footprints belong to who. Are they bad guy footprints, or are they the brothers or the neighbors' footprints? Is it law enforcement or EMS footprints? But it's also understandable, so saving lives is the main priority. Evidence falls second to life-saving measures. So you can understand where it comes from, and we just have to understand who went in. We look at their shoes if we need to, and just kind of work it backwards from there.
Detective Frank explains the first steps of the investigative process for this crime.
Detectives, when they're at the scene, they do interviews with neighbors, with the family, to try to get a little bit of background on, like we talked about, who was the last person to see him, how he lived. They also got photos from the family at the scene, and they went do a canvass through the neighborhood to see if anybody had seen him the day prior or that day. I want to say it was that night. They actually sent a couple of detectives to some of the local bars to see if anybody recognized him as well, if he had been there. Because we knew where he was in the city of West Palm Beach, but nobody knew once he got dropped off in Lake Worth, what bar he might have gone to or bars he might have gone to. Unfortunately, there's a lot of them in the city of Lake Worth, so he could have been in any of them. So they were trying to get kind of a victimology on him to see where he frequented. There's local grocery stores. A lot of these clerks knew him. They recognized him. They know what he'd buy. They know what he drank. So detectives went and did interviews with them as well.
While they have not been able to tie it directly to this crime, Gil's apartment had been burglarized earlier in the year.
In early 2009, around February, his family and coworkers said he was burglarized when he wasn't home. Somebody had broken in and stolen items from his home, and he never reported it to PBSO, but he thought maybe it was somebody that he had just met on the Palm Tram bus. And that was the only information that he had given to people. So after that, his family didn't believe he was bringing people home as often.
Evidence was gathered that may still prove to be helpful.
There were a lot of items that crime scene recovered that were or will be helpful, thanks to some advancements in DNA and technology, which I'll let my partners discuss. But on face value, nothing right there that you could see that would help.
The investigation did lead to a handful of suspects, but they were all eventually ruled out.
I do know that the detectives had put out information to the city of Lake Worth deputies, like, hey, if you come across anybody that has like weird injuries, let us know. So anytime they came across somebody, the detectives would come out and talk to them. And obviously, if somebody's going to come to me and say, hey, do you know this person? Yeah, I know him. I see him walking down the street. We've hung out, had a beer. Well, he was murdered. Did you kill him? No. You're going to give your DNA because you want nothing to do with that. So most, if not all of these people gave elimination standards DNAs to these detectives, so they were ruled out. They also continued to put flyers up, Crime Stoppers flyers. They put them up in different bars, gay bars, straight bars. They put them up on the Palm Tram buses. However they could to get this information out, to get his picture out, to see if somebody, had any information. They did that as well.
As is often the case, money may have been part of the motive for Gil's murder, but Detective Frank believes it was probably more than that.
The money that he withdrew the day before the homicide was not located. So I think this was not just based on what I know and what I saw, this was somebody that knew him, possibly somebody that he trusted, and something happened where it turned into a personal attack. Now, if after that attack or before that attack, this person decided to take some items, I don't know that for certain, but I can tell you that there was money that was not located.
DNA testing was an important part of the process, even though the technology was not as helpful as it is today. Stacy Baker is a senior forensic scientist and DNA analyst at the Palm Beach Sheriff's Office. She says the first tests were performed immediately after the homicide, which showed more than one person's blood was on the scene.
DNA analysis was first performed shortly after the homicide occurred in 2009.
She described what they are looking for.
With DNA, we are searching in crime scenes for any type of foreign DNA, something that is unique to an individual that we can isolate and either identify an individual or input that DNA profile into a national database to potentially have a hit or an investigative lead to a suspect.
Stacy talks about the problem of so much blood and DNA on the scene.
So the challenge with bloody crime scene evidence is that blood contains a lot of DNA. So in a scenario where there is a lot of bloody evidence, it has the potential to mask any type of smaller amounts of evidence or skin cells that were left behind or touch or trace DNA. So the person who left behind the blood evidence can potentially overwhelm any other DNA profiles present. In any homicide or any crime scene, the goal is combing through the evidence to find a DNA profile from a suspect or something that the suspect left behind. And this can depend on many different factors, such as the length of time someone came into contact with an item, the longer amount of time someone comes into contact with an item, the more DNA they generally leave behind. It can also depend on the surface area of an item. So rougher surface areas tend to yield more DNA than smoother surface areas. It can also depend on whether the individual is naturally, whether they shed more DNA than other individuals. So these are all factors that can play into the recovery of DNA.
She explains why evidence collected in 2009 may still be useful today.
In 2009, we were looking at approximately 16 different areas. Currently, we are looking at 27 different areas. So we have a more comprehensive look at the DNA for comparisons. So not only can we search for the owner of that DNA profile or a first order relative of that DNA profile, we can also widen that search and build out family trees from individuals who have voluntarily submitted their DNA into a DNA database and opted in for law enforcement searching back to that piece of crime scene evidence.
Detective Frank says there are many reasons why this case and others like it are difficult to solve.
Part of it was what I had mentioned before, meeting people, just random people at bars. Whether you're, homosexual or not, it doesn't matter. You're meeting random people that you don't know and you're bringing them into your home. If your family doesn't know who this person is, your friends don't know, your coworkers don't know, and if people at the bar that see you together don't come forward and give information, there's no way for us to know who this person is. So it makes it more difficult. It's kind of like going on a wild goose chase when you don't know who you're looking for. The other problem is if he was associated with somebody who was not out with that lifestyle or still closeted, let's say the person was married with kids, it's going to be more difficult for that person to come forward as well. Or possibly if somebody went home and their families don't know that he was gay or homosexual, they're not going to put two and two together and say, well, was this person injured? What could have happened? It's easy to say I was robbed and beaten in the back of the alley versus what actually happened.
She shares what kind of information would be helpful at this point and how to contact her if you know anything that might be helpful, no matter how small.
It would be very helpful if somebody, I know it's been a while, if somebody remembers frequenting those bars. I mean, the victim's face was all over the place back then after he was murdered. They remember him at the bar talking to somebody. Even if they could just provide general information, at least we would know where he was last at, or if they saw him walking down the street with another person. That neighbor that saw him walking south on his street, nobody ever saw him coming back. So obviously he made it back, but was he coming back with somebody? It's 9:30 in the morning on a Saturday. There's got to be people in the neighborhood who saw him walking with somebody. Is it possible that that person was already in the apartment? Yes, but somebody knows something. It's very helpful if somebody, the people that he was in a long-term relationship with, if they came forward, that would be helpful as well. If they weren't involved in this and had nothing to do with it, then there's no reason for them not to come forward and provide information. They can call me at 561-688-4712. They can email me at frencl@pbso.org, or they can be anonymous and call 1-800-458-TIPS, which is our Crime Stoppers of Palm Beach County. And they can also go on the Crime Stoppers of Palm Beach County website and leave anonymous tips there as well. It'll filter its way to me.
Cold Case Florida is a production of the Florida Sheriff's Association, the largest association of its kind in the United States, with more than 100,000 members. Each episode of the podcast highlights an unsolved case from one of Florida's 67 sheriff's offices. Thank you to the participating sheriffs and their teams for assistance in the production of this podcast. If you would like to learn more about the Florida Sheriff's Association or become a member, visit flsheriffs.org today.